Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world when you watch this interview. Welcome, and I hope you're going to enjoy the discussion. I'm Tom van der Hoven, International Development Consultant for IMC. I have Chris Johnson with me, and we'll be talking about hybrid meetings and the challenges that poses to clerks and democratic officers. Welcome, Chris, and thanks for agreeing to share your views with us today. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning, Tom, and thank you so much for having me. As you said, my name is Chris Johnson. I'm the city clerk for the city of Meridian, Idaho. I've been with the city for 3 years, first as a deputy clerk, and then the last 2 as the city clerk.
Great. Chris, what's the size of the population in your city, and how many council members do you have?
Great question, Tom. Meridian is in the Pacific Northwest region of the United States with a population of approximately 120,000. But the population has actually, doubled in the last 20 years. We've seen exponential growth, but our city council expanded 8 years ago, I believe, from 4 members to 6 members. So we have 6 elected city council members on staggered 4-year terms, and our mayor is also elected, and he is not a member of our city council.
Right, so fairly large city then.
It is. It's the second largest city in Idaho, but by U.S. standards, not quite as much as some other cities.
Right. Okay. Thanks. So we know that councils have been hosting virtual meetings during the pandemic, but as we come out of lockdown, I can imagine that there will be the hope to meet face to face again. On the other hand, for some, virtual meetings will have had some advantages, such as less travel, more flexibility. What's been your experience in Meridian?
Again, great question, Tom. In 2019, our city elected a new mayor for the first time in 16 years. At the same time, we had 3 new city council members elected. We swore them all in on January 7th of 2020, and then within 10 weeks of meetings, we had to completely change how we do things. Mayor Semison, our current mayor, was actually the previous mayor's chief of staff, and he and I met before I even knew he was running for mayor. And he told me he really wanted the public to have the ability to sit home on their couch and chime in when there was public participation. So we have a lot of land use items, a lot of public involvement in our meetings, and he wanted to make it flexible for them. So I was really skeptical. The city clerk before and I myself, we both said, it's not going to work. There's so many barriers to that. I don't know how we can do that. At the time, we had no idea what this year was going to bring. When our governor suspended part of our open meeting laws, we quickly started using Zoom because we wanted to keep city business moving, but we also wanted to protect the health and limit the exposure of people in the room. So since we have a lot of people interested in coming to our meetings, we at first did some meetings virtual. We had meetings via Zoom as what we adopted, and I sat at home and connected it to YouTube and ran the meeting from there. The mayor sat in his home, our council members all sat in their respective homes. When the governor suspended that part of the open meeting laws requiring somebody to be present, we quickly found out how to do that in a hybrid format. So we returned to physical city council meetings within, a couple months of our lockdown. And then we wanted to have the meetings so we could keep the minimum number of people here, but also have, participation and maximum transparency. So we do see people attending more recently in person, but we see a lot of participants joining via Zoom from the comfort of their home. The majority of people we spoke with enjoy that option, and I feel we have greater participation now that members of the public, city staff, and our elected leaders can participate from wherever they are.
Yeah, sure. So as we come out of lockdown, there may be the wish to have a choice of how to attend meetings, either virtual or in person, and hence the concept of hybrid meetings. What, in your view, constitutes a hybrid meeting? Because not everybody has the same view as to what constitutes a hybrid meeting.
Absolutely. In my mind, a hybrid meeting is one that is physical and virtually at the same time, also in real time. So the meeting happens both online and in person without any delay between the two. For many years, we at the city have streamed our public meetings on our city's YouTube page. We have quite a few viewers who watch those either live or in repeat, but that doesn't allow participation. It's hard for us to, in fact, we don't allow comments on our YouTube videos because it's hard for us to keep those and maintain those as part of the public record, which is required by our law. So hybrid meeting allows us to follow those open meeting laws while also providing the ability for participation for those people who don't want to come to City Hall, whether that's transportation issues, childcare issues, global pandemic, or any other barrier.
So legislation in different countries we know vary. Does the legislation in your state allow you to hold a virtual or a hybrid meeting in future?
Yes, so Idaho statutes require meetings be open to the public at a designated physical location and the member of the body be present. So we cannot do virtual meetings only, but we can do a hybrid meeting with as few as one person here at City Hall. We can establish our quorum via virtual presence, so our 1/2 plus 1 that are required to make decisions at a meeting. And we're fortunate to have that flexibility and that our city council was supportive as we work through the technological challenges to make hybrid meetings a reality for our citizens.
Oh, that's really interesting because here in the UK, for instance, legislation allows them to have virtual meetings at the moment, but not hybrid meetings. So really interesting. So have you had a discussion with your members as to what sort of meetings they'd like to hold in future when we get out back to a normal situation? Would they like to go back to face-to-face meetings or have hybrid meetings? What are their views?
You know, some council members have different views, but all are very supportive of the hybrid meetings. Some really want to be present at City Hall and be right in front of the public, and they have that opportunity. And some are more comfortable or desire the ability to be at home for various reasons. So our current mayor and city council are in full approval of continuing to host hybrid meetings. Typically, we have our mayor and 2 of our 6 council members here at City Council Hall or here at City Hall in our chambers. And then the other 4 council members either participate in home or some come to City Hall and join us in an office upstairs or off to the side. Some are always virtual, at least 2, and some rotate between virtual and in person, depending on their needs of that week.
Okay, right. So what sort of arrangements have you got in place to hold your meetings, and how did you go about it?
Well, in the summer of 2020, we were able to use federal funding provided via our government's CARES Act. We spent, I believe, about $16,000 to upgrade the audio and visual settings in our city council chambers to be able to integrate with Zoom. So what happened is we took all of the microphones, all of the cameras that are already in the room that we use for YouTube and presentations, and connected them in through basically an Android tablet that connects into Zoom and allows us to hear and share from the room to anywhere our viewers are. I was fortunate we had a member of our internet technology team work very closely with contractors that were brought in to do that. And they sat down with me and members of my team to look at the system as we run it from our station here and make sure the functionality was user-friendly. So rather than having to use multiple systems, we really tied it into what we already had. This past year, we only had 1 meeting in 2020 that we had to cancel due to issues. And that was actually related to Zoom having an outage in connecting to YouTube. We did not want to, run the meeting without the public being able to see it. So we had to cancel that meeting, but we quickly figured out how to make things work and got back to it. So I run hybrid meetings much in the same way as a traditional meeting, with the exception I'm watching for virtual attendees on my computer screen while also watching for them to walk in the room and making sure that everyone has access to speak when they're recognized for that.
Okay, thanks. So what sort of things are required to hold your meeting? How did you go about setting it up for the meetings?
Great question. So we create a Zoom link for every meeting and put that on the top of our agenda. We had to install, like I mentioned, the software in the room. So we have an audio or a Android tablet that is a audio video control for the room. So it controls our 4 cameras as well as all the microphones. Everybody that joins us in person logs in via the computer at their station, and we purchased webcams for each of them. So they are not only on the room camera, but also individually on camera, just like those joining from home. We use the microphones in the room so that every computer doesn't have its own microphone. Those have all been disabled, so we don't have feedback issues and those kind of things that happen when you have so many microphones happening in the same room on Zoom. As the clerk of the meeting, I act as the host. So I start the meeting, do all the other things I normally would do if it was a in-person traditional meeting. But then I'm actually watching the Zoom controls to see who's joining us and then giving them the appropriate access. We use a webinar format, which I certainly can speak to more, but that gives us control over who has the ability to turn on their camera, start a presentation, or even speak into their microphone. Um, our mayor does an excellent job explaining the meeting process to those attending physically as well as virtually. So they know how the meeting's being run and they know what is to be expected. In the early stages, our city's communication manager, who works out of the mayor's office, she and I worked very closely on a script that was read at the beginning of meetings that explained how the process worked, what controls you had in your Zoom panel at home or on your phone, and how you could join the meeting at appropriate times.
Right. Chris, just thinking of meeting facilities, and I would suppose that where council has a large number of members, that a meeting room or council chambers will limit what they can do, especially if it's a hybrid meeting. And then thinking about members of the public, can you accommodate all of the members of the public, or do you have to limit numbers? What's your view on this?
Great question. So we've actually been able to expand the amount of people we can assist or have participate in our meetings by using Zoom. Fortunately, we have a modern city council chambers. We can seat 144 people here when health requirements allow. We've fluctuated that based on guidance from local health authorities, from 10 people in the room up to now 50 with the appropriate distancing. So we have seats in here for 30. We have seats up at our council desks for our mayor, our 6 council members, our city attorney, and myself. So 9 of us here. But in spreading out, we're able to accommodate who is here. If we have multiple groups of people coming in for different topics on the agenda, we do try to stagger those. At first, we actually put on the agenda this item will not start before this time note, so that if we had members of the public coming in to discuss an issue, they knew that if they came at 7:30 p.m., they wouldn't be missing the beginning of their item. A couple times that backfired. We had an item finish at 6:30 and our next item was not beginning until 6:30. So we learned from that. We didn't have to do that very often. Since that time, we've had more people on Zoom than we've had in person. But the great thing is we can have more that way. We can allow more participation without worrying about limiting the number of people coming into City Hall, and also helping those families who maybe mom or dad are coming to speak to City Council, that they have 1 or 2 or more children with them, and helps them kind of manage that by not having to be here physically.
Right. Technology. You've referred to that briefly. What sort of setup did you opt for in the end?
We actually, I believe, are at the setup that we want to have. As I mentioned, our mayor wanted the ability for the public to either call in or join by video and join those meetings. I was concerned initially because I was afraid we would have somebody come in and their dog is barking the entire time in the background, or they have something inappropriate there. And I was really concerned, and we've not seen that. And with using Zoom, we're fortunate that I have control over that as well. Because we use webinar, which is slightly different than meeting, and I'm happy to briefly explain that. Our webinar format, if you've not seen a webinar before, is really set up and designed for 1 or 2 people to speak to a group. But we can actually have multiple participants in a webinar. So when a meeting begins in a webinar format, I admit our council members, our city attorney, and key city staff who are part of the meeting as panelists in it, so that they can turn their microphone on and off and share their presentations as the meeting goes on. Those who are joining from the public are there as an attendee, meaning I can see they're there, our council members can see they're there, and they are able to participate at the appropriate time. So if there is a public hearing on something, we go through that process. The staff at City Hall or virtually will present the application. We'll then let the applicant make their statement. And at that time, I change their role from attendee to panelist, giving them the ability to do their presentation and essentially be a part of the meeting. When they're done, I change their role back to attendee, and then we go through the members of the public who've signed up to speak. If you're in person, you simply walk up when your name is called and speak into the microphone. Everybody here and at home can see you. If you're on Zoom, we change your role to attendee so you can do the same thing, almost like you're physically present, except you're hopefully a little more comfortable at home.
Right, interesting. Funding is always an issue, and especially for smaller councils. I can imagine that could be quite costly. Did you find it costly for what you set up?
Not in the greater scheme of things. I mean, 16,000 is a large amount, depending on the city's size and the city's budget, the municipality's budget. But because our council chambers was already modern, we really only had to do the upgrade with the tying in the cameras and the audio. There are certainly probably cheaper solutions to that, but it really depends on what folks have in their cities and municipalities right now. If they're using a meeting room and they have the ability to simply add webcams to what they already have or use laptops, that can work just as well as long as you resolve those audio issues. At first, before we had our audio fixed, we had a lot of issues with noise cancellation. So the system in the room wasn't set up for a Zoom meeting. So Zoom had noise cancellation built in and our room did. So we had certain microphones in certain places in the room that when somebody was speaking, anybody participating from home suddenly would just not hear them. They would just get cut out entirely. So that's why we spent the money to upgrade the room. But depending on what you already have where you are, you may have very minimal upgrades where you could have some more extensive things. I think as technology evolves, staying on top of those things will make things less costly in the long run. So I encourage anyone, if you're able to make small improvements and small upgrades with your audio and video in the room, then tying it into Zoom at a later time, if necessary, is not going to be as costly as it could be.
Right. It sounds like a fairly complex setup. Do you require more staff to actually now help you manage the meetings, clerking the meetings?
Actually, no. Initially in the summer, or not summer, in the spring of 2020, when we were first starting out, figuring out how this works and working with really limiting the number of people here and struggling with our audio issues, we had my deputy city clerk support me during city council meetings, and I supported her during commissions that she is the clerk of. And this was really, like I said, because of the audio issues. We had somebody present physically to speak to our council or our commission. We put them in a room off to the side with a laptop because we didn't want their audio to cut out. We've actually been doing hybrid meetings since the beginning. And because we also stream to our YouTube page, we're really giving our citizens the maximum ability to not just see what their council is doing, but participate. So I've not had to have additional staff. Whoever is the clerk of that meeting is able to successfully manage the Zoom platform as well as the room simultaneously.
Okay, so that's managing the hardware. But do you have more people, for instance, somebody supporting the chairman and somebody else managing speaking of members or public, or is that all done by one person?
Mostly one person. We've not had that need. We do have a member of our city's planning staff here. So if there are public hearings related to land use items, they are here to support in loading presentations and communicating with the public. But they have been here since before we were in hybrid meetings or before we had Zoom in the room. It was just part of our process. Generally, if there's a member of the public here to speak, they can sign up online, or we have a piece of paper in the back of the room. And as the clerk, I just walk back and forth and get that. So I just added that to, or I've always done that, but I've just now added looking at my screen and determining who's there as part of that. So it's been great. In fact, we've actually had less staff than in the past because I can now control the YouTube stream simultaneously with Zoom and not have to have somebody from the communication team here managing YouTube at the same time.
Oh, interesting. Protocols. Have you got any protocols in place, like rules of debate, behaviors, members of the public, question and answers, things like that?
Our protocols have mostly remained the same. Our mayor is an excellent chair of a meeting, and he's transitioned to hybrid meetings with ease. As I mentioned earlier, he was wanting to do this before we knew it would be necessary. So I do have a member of the internet technology, our IT team. I've got a standing agreement with them to be available 30 minutes before the meeting in case a member of our council has an issue getting into their computer, something like that. The types of things we would be having, even if we weren't using Zoom or having a hybrid meeting. Generally, we can get things corrected prior to the start of the meeting. And then all of our city council members, city staff, anybody in the meeting, in the webinar as a host, anybody in the webinar as a panelist has the ability to see everybody present. So they're generally aware of who's there, what they need, and who should be speaking any given time, much like they're in the room. And since we're using the webinar format, it gives me really great control over who can participate at any given moment. It helps a lot. When we were deciding between meetings and what are the, okay, I'm going to pause there and.
Okay, no, that's fine. That's really interesting because some people just use the Zoom format in the normal way, not the webinar way of doing it. So this is an interesting way, I think, where people can learn a lot from what you're doing. Have you got anything in writing that you can share with people about how you set up or how you manage?
We didn't create anything in writing for that, which is something that definitely would be handy. And I'm asking the folks who helped me arrange this, set that up. We created a guidance for our city staff who host Zoom meetings to understand how to create the meeting, the protocols of the logins and things like that, and then how to physically start the meeting. And then we have a protocol and a handbook on how to run all of the audio and video that's now integrated with Zoom in our council chambers. But we didn't get to that part because it's been, for the most part, me doing all of that. And kind of going back to Zoom, when we were looking at various functions, you know, with Teams or GoToMeeting or Zoom, we found that our webinar function in Zoom is what really sold it for us, just because we can monitor and control who's attending and give them those speaking rights. Works very well that way.
Good, good. Which brings me to the next question, which is how you allow members of the public to speak. Do they have to register with you in advance or can they just log in? If you can just explain that a bit.
Sure. We really love public involvement. Our public here is fantastic. As I said, we're growing and they have a lot of feedback for us. So we love when the public are here. So for several years, we've actually had the ability for members of the public to sign up in advance while looking at an agenda. They can click a button that goes to a web page that anybody in our council during a meeting, and then myself at any point, can see who is signed up. But we don't require that. So before COVID, we had iPads in the back of the room, so people would click what they wanted to talk about, enter their name and information, and then I could read that more easily than a handwritten note. But we've gone back to paper in the back, so somebody can sign up in advance. They can write their name in the paper, and then after that, the mayor does ask, is there anyone else in attendance here for this public hearing that would like to be heard? And at that point, if somebody raises their hand in the room, they're invited to come up. If they raise their hand in Zoom, we then allow them that access as well and give them the same rights as others who had signed up in advance. So it's a lot of public involvement, but we really want to give everyone the ability. We don't want someone to feel that they were not heard because they didn't understand at the beginning of the meeting that they had to fill out a form. So we really believe in allowing everyone the opportunity. We like for them to sign up in advance so we have a general idea, and also it's easier to capture their name for the permanent record. But if you just show up and decide last minute that your question wasn't addressed and you want to speak, we allow that opportunity as well.
Right, interesting. Just, do members of the public, do they view a webcast or do they log into the same system as the council?
They actually use the same Zoom link. So we give that link out on every agenda we publish, so somebody can join that way or via phone, the same as anybody on our city council or mayor or staff. We do broadcast the meeting on the YouTube page, and we encourage those who are just casual viewers to join that way. But if they feel they may want to participate, we certainly want them to come into Zoom so that we can recognize them right away.
And I suppose, Chris, because you use the webinar version of Zoom, that makes it possible. Otherwise, you'd have it would be very difficult if everyone linked in and you had a whole screen full of faces looking at you. So absolutely. I would imagine the webinar actually facilitates that.
It does it very well. I can choose who's able to be on screen at any given time. And there are times where I bring somebody in a little early before their time and they may turn their camera on. I can turn their camera back off. So hopefully I don't offend people when I do that, but we want to make sure our council and our current topic are who's present on the screen, because those viewers, that's who they want to see and that's what they want to hear about.
Sure. How do you manage voting in a hybrid situation?
For all of our votes, we typically are either voice votes or roll call votes, so we have no electronic voting. Our agenda management tool we use allows for that, but our body does not do that. When we were initially, and even now a little bit hybrid, a lot of times somebody will state who they are when they address the mayor. So they may say, "Mr. Mayor, this is Councilman this," and then he knows who he's addressing. It's helped really well for those, keeping track of the meeting to know who's speaking, especially with so many faces on the screen and when they're not in the same room. So a lot of times the mayor may not recognize a voice, so that person will definitely say who they are when they address the mayor, so we can keep the meeting moving.
Okay, good. Is it more difficult and time consuming to set up your meetings?
Initially it was more time consuming, and I think that was because we were trying to figure out which computers needed to be on, where did cameras need to be. Now it's second nature. Now that we have it set up, it's as simple as just opening the Zoom meeting and connecting it to the room at the beginning, which is 30 seconds of my time.
Okay. Telephone, have you got provision for members to actually join the meeting by telephone? Well, not only members, but members of the public as well?
We do. So along with having the link on every agenda, we do have the phone number and the meeting ID there as well. So anybody can join from their phone. And then we watch for those and try to figure out who they are. If I have a council member joining by phone, generally they've told me ahead of time, and I ask for the last 3 digits of their telephone number so I can rename them in the system and give them those speaking rights. If it's a member of the public, I generally don't know who they are, but when it comes time for public participation, if our mayor sees that somebody is joining by phone, he will make a point of telling them how to raise their hand with their keypad. Top of my head, I can never remember if it's *5 or *9, but it's one of those two. He will tell them what it is, and then if their hand comes up, I allow them to speak and they can unmute and address council, just as if they're there via webcam. Just some people don't have that ability, or it just works better for them audio-wise.
I can imagine that not all members are equally proficient with technology. Did you have to do any training for members?
We didn't have to do much training. We support city council members one-on-one as they need to resolve technology issues, but we've really not had any issues. We try to assist the public when they have questions, but since I'm not able to see what their issue is, it's hard to be technical support remotely, especially while running a meeting. So since we offer many ways to participate, we hope everyone finds a way to have their voice heard. We do take public comment via email. We have a voicemail line for that. We have a text line for that. So we hope the public, if they have those issues connecting in, do feel that they've had the opportunity to be heard. If we notice someone having an issue, sometimes we will pause the meeting and I can support in real time. There's been times where we've had somebody with severe audio issues and we've paused the meeting. I've typed up here's the phone number you need to call, here's this, in case they don't have it in front of them, and we'll put it on the screen. And we'll tell that person, try calling this number, and then we'll watch for them and I'll let them in so they can speak. So we do try to make things go as quickly as possible for the public and give them support. And then sometimes we also, not sometimes, for some commissions that have participation, we will state at the beginning of the meeting, if you have issues, here's an email address to email, we will try to help you. I don't know if you can see this or not, but we created a little, cheat sheet for how to join the Zoom meeting that I have at all of the stations here. So we have a lot of commissions at the city and they meet once a month, and in one case, once every 3 months. So I don't expect them to remember since they're not doing it every week. So we have this little handy cheat sheet for what they need to do when joining, so they don't accidentally try to turn on their audio or change some other control.
That's great. Specific training of officers. Did you do any training?
Not necessarily. We did really on-the-job training, so to speak. So our first couple meetings, we trained and we were over, not over top, but sitting beside a council member, helping them, get connected and know what to do. But it's really intuitive, and our council members who are always remote are just fantastic and quickly figured it out without really needing any support from us.
Good, great. Chris, I think that brings us to the end of our discussion. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us today. I'm pretty sure that our members will find it very helpful.
I really hope so, and I appreciate the opportunity to share, Tom. I enjoy, sharing this and learning from my colleagues, and I appreciate IIMC and you and their staff for keeping members engaged and informed. Always happy to answer any questions or provide examples of what we do. While I don't have a handbook, I can certainly, share what we do have and even, give somebody a virtual tour of the room here. So if anybody does have questions, they can reach out to me directly at my email address, which I know you'll share, or via LinkedIn, and I'll make sure you have that information as well.
Great. Yes, I'll certainly make sure that we publish that when we publish the recording. To any of you out there, if you have views or comments on today's discussion, then please feel free to email me at imeet@iimc.com. I repeat, imeet@iimc.com. Well, thank you for joining us. Goodbye and stay safe.